What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Rustomod Garage. I've had so much good response on the C10 videos. I would love to keep making these videos showing you guys what we did and the build process of this truck. The C10 currently isn't on the lift because we're filming a new build series that you guys will have to stay tuned for. Really excited about this one. We have a lot of in-depth coverage of this next build series, and we should get that up in a few months here. So we're gonna keep going on videos on the C10 for now. So on this episode, I wanna show you guys how we did the entire interior, the entire roll cage, and a bunch of cool little details that we implemented into our all-wheel drive C10 that you guys might be able to put into your C10 project, all-wheel drive or two-wheel drive. So I'll show you guys what we did. All right, if you guys aren't familiar, this is our 1968 Chevrolet C10, and it is sitting on a 2007 Cadillac Escalade, and I'll link all the video playlists up here and you guys can go check those out. Our main goal for this project was to do a turbo LS all-wheel drive truck that we can do awesome things like hot rod power tour and drag week and sick week and a bunch of stuff like that. So we want to do drag and drive style events with this kind of thing, but we wanted to do something a little bit different and do an all-wheel drive build. You can see in the back we use the entire chassis of a 2007 Escalade to do this all-wheel drive project. Right now it's a little bit torn apart because we are doing some upgrades to it, and actually ended up sending the transmission off, which you guys will see in another episode to see what upgrades we're going to do to that thing, but it should change the entire characteristics of this truck, hopefully. So in this episode, I really want to go over the roll cage. I've got a lot of comments on what cage that we use and how we were able to implement it into the C10. And I also want to go over some interior details and show you guys what we did in the inside of this thing, what shifter we used, what seats, what gauges, and how everything goes together. So let's get into it. So to begin, the roll cage that we used was actually a pre-bent cage. You can get it from Jegs or Summit, and I'll link the one that we got down in the description so you guys can check it out. But we did end up modifying the cage kind of severely to be able to meet some of the parameters that we had to do on the C10. If you guys watched our Rambler build series, we were able to make that cage a little bit easier because we ended up dropping the entire body of the Rambler onto the frame of the Rambler. And so that was a lot easier to make the cage because we could weld everything ahead of time and then drop the body down on top. And it was all welded and we didn't have to get into tight spaces and gaps like we have to do on the C10. So this was kind of our first traditional style roll cage that we've made. And as you can see, it's kind of incomplete because we're missing our door bars, but other than that, the cage is pretty much done. We just didn't put the door bars in because it's a lot easier to get in and out. We want to be able to drive this thing on the road, so it just makes it a little bit easier. And like I said, we just got this project done a few months ago, so we want to test things out before we hit the drag strip and see what this thing can do. So in my opinion, what makes a roll cage really good, besides the safety aspect, is try to be as least amount of invasive to the driver as possible. And we tried to do that with this roll cage as well. We wanted the cage to be as tight up to the rails as possible so that when you look at the car from the outside, you don't necessarily see it. Obviously, you're gonna have the down bars in the back, out of the back of the cab, but whenever you walk up to it, you don't really notice it. And whenever you're driving the car, you don't really notice it as well. So you open the door and you can see that we were able to get the roll cage pretty tight. So when you hop in and out of the car, you're not hitting your head on bars or smacking bars whenever you get it in and out, and whenever you drive it, it doesn't feel like the car has a full cage. Obviously, whenever we put a door bar in there, that'll be a bit more invasive, but we'll try to do it in a way that is streetable as well. Like I said, this was a pre-built cage that we got online, and originally the cage was pretty okay. Whenever we got it, it was the main hoops were bent and these down bars in the front were bent. Obviously everything was cut a little bit long so you could kind of do what you want with it. We ended up using a company called Affordable Bender to be able to modify it a little bit more to be able to fit our needs some, so that way we could get a little bit more room inside the cabin of this thing. So if you can see behind the seat here, we ended up putting a little bit of an arc on both of these bars that go behind the seat, so that way we could slide the seat completely back. I've seen guys end up putting this bar all the way almost to the window so they could move the bar back, but for our purpose we ended up having plenty of room just by doing that. Originally these C10s have a gas tank here, so obviously that was removed and replaced with a fuel cell. and we ended up welding the D-bars and the harness bars in and just adding a little bit of a radius to that so to get that seat as far back as we could without having to do any major modifications to the roll cage. Now up top here, you can see we tried to get it as tight as we could to the roof with leaving some room to be able to weld this thing, obviously. The only thing that we had to get rid of was our sun visors and our dome light in the back, which we replaced with an LED strip, and I'll get into that whenever we go in through the interior. These bars had to be adjusted slightly just to get them as tight as we could, but ended up it wasn't too bad. We tried to get this knee bar just up as high as we could, tucked right underneath the dash there, so that it would be non-invasive, but we also wanted to put it in front of the dash. I see some guys put this through the dash. We wanted it in front just so it'd be easier to do, but just less invasive. Now, if you guys are familiar with truck style roll cages, these bars have to be welded to a plate and then sandwiched on the bottom of the cab, and then have bars going from the cab to the frame rail, so everything's connected directly to the frame. So if you can see here, we ended up going from that plate that we had to weld to directly to our frame rail, and all this unbolts. So if we ever wanted to unbolt the cab from our frame, then we would be able to, and it would be a lot easier than having to cut stuff, then directly weld the roll cage straight to the frame. Now, one of my favorite aspects of the build was one of the hardest things to do, which was drilling into the cab. We ended up drilling 2 spots in the cab for our down bars. I originally thought that we were going to be able to go through the glass, but if you look through here, you wanted to get the bar up as high as possible so we could have plenty of room for our helmets and stuff like that, and putting the bar lower would interfere and wouldn't be as tall enough with the seating position that we wanted. So we ended up having to go through the top of the cab and then going down to our frame rails in the back. And what we wanted to do was just make it removable, like I was saying, so we could still remove this cab if we ever needed to, if we wanted to repair something. A nice feature, which I wasn't really planning on doing until we started laying this out, was these spring perches are on the Escalade frame already. And so I was going to just cut them out whenever we started doing this project, because we have coilovers in the back now. And I'm glad I didn't, because these ended up being a perfect location for our roll cage mounts straight to the frame. Instead of building something, we ended up just utilizing something that was already there. So it ended up working perfect for our roll cage, and it ties in really nicely with the bed. So once we do a bed floor in this, obviously you won't be able to see any of this, but now you guys will know that this actually was tied into a factory location anyway. So sitting in the C10, I have plenty of headroom and plenty of room to move around on the C10. I'm not the tallest guy in the world, but it's comfortable for me to be able to sit in this truck, and somebody taller than me would be perfectly comfortable sitting in here as well. So looking underneath here, like I said in previous videos, this steering column is a Motion Raceworks column for a Chevy Silverado. And I had a lot of people ask a better in-depth of how we mounted it. So the column comes with this style firewall mount, and I kind of utilized it and made a bracket to be able to mount there. And then up here where the C10 column normally mounts, I just cut the bracket off of the Silverado and re-welded it onto there, and it mounts exactly where the C10 steering column normally would mount. Just 2 bolts, and it's pretty easy. So a really nice column, and it allows you to have all the mounts, so for like a line lock or whatever buttons you want to put on it, and it has the removable steering wheel to be able to get in and out of this thing. So it's a nice column, and I've never seen it utilized in a C10, but maybe you guys could do that in future C10s, or maybe Motion will make one for a C10 eventually. But we ended up using their column, and it works pretty good. I'll go over this again too, because I had a few questions about throttle. We are running a drive-by cable throttle body, and this gas pedal is out of a square body Chevy, and it actually mounts really similar to the stock gas pedal on the original C10, but that style ends up using a rod to be able to move the carburetor and not a cable. So we just pulled this one out of a square body, and with a few modifications it ended up bolting up. I believe I had to make a bracket to be able to adapt it, and then that uses the regular traditional cable style to be able to use to our LS. I ended up using these speakers I got on Amazon, and they're actually for a boat. We just wanted to get some roll cage mounted speakers for our Bluetooth radio. So I'll show you guys how we did that. Pretty slick. It ended up working out really well. And the sound in here, since it's such a small cabin, is actually pretty good. We also have our roll cage mounted cup holders. I think we also got those on Amazon as well. But the radio I got on Amazon, and I really didn't like the aftermarket radios with Bluetooth and stuff because they were kind of cheesy looking, and I thought this one looks a little bit more period correct. Originally the radio mounts here, and I have to make something for our boost gauge to be able to mount something there, but the cutout for the radio is very small, so the heater controls are normally where the radio is now. And this truck, I don't have heat or air conditioning in it yet. I'm not sure if I'm going to add it eventually, but I wanted to not have to cut the dash, so I ended up moving the radio here, and then we ended up 3D printing a bezel around it to be able to fit the radio in there. And I think it looks pretty good. I don't think you would really know unless you've seen a stock C10 style with the controls down there. So I'm going to make a bezel for this. That's something else I have to do still. Now, another one of my favorite things about this truck, and I'll remove our steering wheel here so you can get a better look, is our gauge panel. So a lot of guys will use the Dakota Digital gauges to be able to work with modern fuel injection motors and stuff, but I ended up not really being too big of a fan of the layout. I really wanted the tack in the middle, and I wanted a place to put our Terminator screen, and not really many aftermarket solutions for that, so we ended up making our own, and I think that's kind of one of my favorite aspects of this build. It was actually very simple to do, and I'll show you guys how we did it. This truck is a 68 truck, and it doesn't have these gauges on the bottom here originally, so I wanted to add them so I could add a little bit more mechanical gauges to this thing. So we ended up finding aftermarket gauges that would fit these sizes and then implementing them into the original C10 gauge cluster. So we have our speedometer that ends up connecting to our Holley Terminator, and that runs our speed and everything like that very easily. Tack also connects to the Terminator and then shows our RPM. I wanted that one right up front and center so I could see my shift points and everything like that if we're going down the drag strip or something like that. We have a fuel gauge, and then our voltage gauge is covered the most with our turn signal switch, because we have this aftermarket turn signal switch so we can use flashers and turn signals like we drive this thing on the road, but that's not as important as the other gauges are. The temperature and then oil pressure are over here, which you can see the best, meaning that those are probably the most important gauges. Now, one really cool setup here is the Terminator screen. So we ended up designing this screen. As you can see here, we have our logo in it and stuff, and we wanted to make it look just like all the rest of the gauges, so we ended up 3D printing this bezel out and adding some lights, indicator lights on it, so we can see whether we're in four-wheel drive, and then see our high beam switch and stuff like that. And then we just have a light just for oil pressure, or we can kind of program it to do whatever we want. I don't think we've hooked that one up yet. So what's nice about this setup is while I'm driving down the road, I can go to our Holley and do whatever I need to do right here. Really easy to reach, really easy to touch, look at different gauge views, or see stuff that I need to see. And then while I drive down the road, I also have all the gauges that are on the Holley screen as well, while having all the mechanical gauges really easy, accessible, and I really like this feature. We also added a stylus holder. I don't know if you guys have messed with the Terminator too much, but it comes with a stylus to be able to type in some of the fine numbers on the screen. You have to adjust some things, so we have a place for that, which is pretty slick. And then if you have to get this out to upload a tune or something, you can pull it out, and we have a slot for the cable so that we can move this around and then upload our file, our tune, or whatever we have to do to the ECU. So it still pops out and then just pushes in right like that, and it's ready to go. So really slick setup, something I haven't really seen much of, but I think it's a pretty cool aspect of the C10. Like I showed you guys in the other videos, I ended up cutting the floor out of this and raising it up so that we could fit the 480 that we have in here. If we used a high hump transmission, we probably would not have to do that, but just because of the transmission setup that this truck originally had, it had the low hump floor, so that way the transmission was really low profile, but we need the extra room, so we ended up bumping it up. I ended up just ordering a carpet online to be able to fit the high hump transmission, and it goes in normal. I have sound deadener and everything underneath of it just to quiet it down in here, but it's really not bad. It drives pretty nice with this kind of sound deadening in here. It's not too loud at all. As I showed you guys before, I have the transfer case shifter selector, which actually isn't hooked up because our transmission isn't in here right now. Like I said, we're sending that out to get it rebuilt, but actually I can pull it up and show you guys. The transmission selector, we have a piece of carbon fiber just for the handle, but we ended up water jetting this piece, and it allows you to select 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive or neutral. We have it locked out of 4 low just so we won't be able to accidentally go into 4 low. So that way this is able to still select the drive modes that you would want and end up showing it here so you can see whether it turns into 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive whenever you're driving down the road, just like your normal truck. For our shifter, I have a B&M Pro ratchet shifter. Honestly, it was the cheapest one I could find on Amazon, and it works fine. I probably will end up upgrading it sometime to just a regular shifter, but for now it works and it shifts fine. I haven't had any problems with it, and it just mounts to the floor with 4 riv nuts in the bottom, so very easy setup. Somebody's asking about the shift cable. The shift cable just came with it, so it comes in a big box. You can get all the kind of setup that you'd want. What's nice about it is you can do 4-speed or 3-speed or 2-speed, whatever. It's very easy to manipulate for whatever aspect of transmission that you guys want to run. Now for the wiring harness on the truck, we ended up going with a company called American Auto Wire, and it was a really great kit for the price. It laid out the entire truck and let you do accessories, kind of if you guys wanted to run whatever kind of accessories you want. It leaves extra wires for stuff like that. Really good for LS kind of stuff. Allows for modern drivetrains to be implemented into the C10. So American Auto Wire is the kit that we used to wire the whole truck, and then we just implemented the Holley Terminator harness to that harness, and it was a lot easier. Uses a modern fuse box, and it's just a really easy setup to get you guys going on the road. So it was a really easy process to wire this thing, and I'll show you guys a little bit of the wiring that we did. So in our glove box here, I need to make a panel to go in here so we can actually have a glove box, but just have everything labeled up here. Yeah, it kind of looks like a mess. We were trying to fight some final wiring things with this truck with boost control set up, so it kind of looks like a mess right now, but we'll tidy it up whenever we finish this. The glove box area is pretty standard. We just wanted to be able to access everything, so we have our Holley and all of our relays labeled and easy access, so if we have any issues we can easily monitor them and change out what we need. As you can see under there, there's the new fuse panel that comes with the kit, and they also give you new switches and just new lights, bulbs, everything. It was a really nice kit. We're not sponsored or anything by them, but if you guys are looking to do a restoration on a C10 in general, it was a really good kit to use. So it was pretty affordable, and I definitely highly would recommend them. I don't know if you guys have ever been working on your project and you're broken down on the side of the road and you just can't see anything. So we ended up with our dome lights and then adding a bunch of lights all around the truck, dome lights and stuff that we mount to our roll bar, and then LED lights around, so that way we can see stuff if we ever have an issue on the side of the road or anything like that, so that way we can get to what we need to get to. But I wanted to add a bunch of lights because it's always the worst situation when you're stuck on the side of the road and you can't see anything. It's the middle of the night, it's raining or whatever, and you just don't have the light to be able to fix the issue that you need. So we wanted to add lights in this thing to be able to fix those issues, because we definitely have had a few of them. Oh, and also I forgot to mention, our horn is right here where the blinkers used to go. And we wanted to implement that somewhere. I didn't really plan on putting it there, but the buttons kind of fit there perfectly. And we have our turn signal indicators on our stock anyway, so we didn't really need 2 turn signal indicators. Now I got a ton of questions about where we got these seats from. If you saw our last episode of the F250 build, we ended up getting some seats out of a Range Rover Evoque, and they actually kind of match these seats, but they're very heavy, they're power and have heated and cooled and stuff in them, and we didn't want to have really heavy seats in this, and we ended up using these seats on the Rambler as well because they look very nice and they're very affordable. but have kind of this tan leather look that I really like, that goes with the blue, goes with greens, and I think that these look very nice and they're very affordable. I got these actually on eBay, and I'll try to put a link down below if you guys are interested in them, but I just looked up tan racing seats and these were the first ones that pop up, and they were cheap enough, so I was like, shoot, might as well. And they actually are really nice. I've been riding them for years and they're pretty nice seats. They're all mechanical adjusted, which is what I wanted, and kind of a luxury kind of seat like that. So really nice seat, and I'll get you guys a link to that so you can go check them out. But that also matches our aftermarket tan dash pad and then the carpet as well. I did have to adapt the seat to the rail on the bottom. I got this online. I think I got it on Speedway, and this just allows the seat to bump up off the floor to be able to get the ride height set perfectly to where I wanted it. And then our race quip harnesses just bolt right to that seat bracket as well. So it worked out pretty well. Pretty simple setup on the seating arrangement in this truck. And that's pretty much it on the C10. All the amenities that we have are pretty nice, and like a new modern vehicle, we have Bluetooth, power steering, power brakes, everything like that. A full roll cage, and it not being too invasive, so we can still drive this thing on the street. So that's pretty much the good rundown of the interior and cage on the C10. So in the next video, I'm sure I'll show you guys some other details of the build, but I also wanted to give you an update. I know a bunch of guys were asking about the front camber on the truck. I ended up finding a company that sells Camber Adjust arms, and so if you can see, the camber is not nearly as bad as it was. I ended up installing these arms, and I make a full video about installing them, showing how they install, but they actually worked pretty good. Now the camber is pretty good. I still have a little bit of camber just because I want to clear my fender here, but the camber is dramatically improved and much better handling of the truck now because of that. So I'll make a video about the correction camber kit that I got, and installing the control arms and stuff like that. And then I'll also show you guys what we're going to be doing with this thing. I sent the transmission off to get some upgrades, and I'll go over the details in that in a future video. But that's going to do it for this video on the C10, guys. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe so you guys can see what we're going to do next on this truck. We're going to go to the drag strip. We're going to do a bunch of stuff with this thing coming up very soon. Like, comment, subscribe so you can be updated to see all the future renditions of the C10 and other projects that we're going to have in the future coming up here the next few months. So we'll see you guys on the next one.